Don't look now, but man, Kevin Jennings, SMU got their dude at quarterback.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. We'll discuss that in just a second. Welcome to another week of Locked On SMU here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. I'm Grayson Singleton. Glad you're with me here today. And our episode today is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Coming up on the show today, the defensive line dominates, and not in the way that you guys are thinking, because when that just came out of my mouth, you guys probably all thought I was stupid based on how SMU stopped the run, or didn't. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Plus, SMU is getting better at situational football. The things that plagued them earlier this year, we're going to talk about that to close up the show. But hey, let's go ahead and start with the man behind center, Kevin Jennings, number 7, who is starting to stack days. And did I think it's kind of wild? I'll say this. It's kind of wild that we ended last week talking about how Kevin Jennings wasn't a top 10 quarterback in the country. And I will say this week, even though he played exceptionally well, I don't know if it moved me that much to throw him into the top 10. But it is wild that we ended last week talking about that. And then on Saturday, he goes 22 of 30 for 247, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. And that no picks there is incredibly important. Because if you want to make the argument that Kevin Jennings is a top 10 quarterback in the country, the one thing you could come back to in terms of a rebuttal to that is he turns the ball over a little bit more than you're comfortable with. But that number combined with 8 incompletions and 2 touchdowns, man, I will say this. SMU's got their due. SMU has got their due at quarterback. And if this guy continues to improve throughout the rest of the year, SMU could end up in the ACC championship again. And the ACC is wide open. I mean, wide open. And we're going to talk more about that on tomorrow's episode. So you're going to want to come back for that. But Kevin Jennings, that is 2 games in a row where, if my math is correct and my memory serves me correct, in 2 games to open up conference play, Kevin Jennings has thrown 13 incompletions between those 2 games. 13 incompletions, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He's been awesome. He has been awesome. And by the way, the playmaking with his legs made a reappearance in this game against Stanford. But what I find very fascinating about Kevin Jennings and why I'm so ecstatic about him and his fit with SMU is that no matter what, KJ's good. And not good is in the sense that he's a good player, even though he certainly is. I mean, he's good as in he's emotionally good. Like, I'm good. And when I say that, I'm talking about what the defense gives him and what's available to him. Because in these first 2 games of conference play, and none more apparent than in this game against Stanford, he just takes what's there. And yes, he's an aggressive dude with a good live arm that can push the ball down the field. But it just wasn't there. Did you see how Stanford was playing them? Stanford was playing them in a no big plays type of defense. It was a shell coverage. They weren't going to allow anybody to beat them deep. And he said, all right, I got Jordan Hudson back. I got Romello here. Ymir can make some catches in the short game. RJ Maryland. And I'm cool with throwing it, short. I'm cool with comeback routes, little crosser routes, a couple dig routes here and there in the intermediate. He's good. And let me tell you this, based on the way Stanford was playing them, because keep in mind, Stanford didn't want anything over the top. When you average 8 yards per attempt, that is a really good day. When you average 8 yards per attempt in any day, it's a good day. But when you average 8 yards per attempt with the way the defense was playing them, that is exceptional. I mean, you look at the receiving numbers. Outside of Jordan Hudson, Romello Brinson, 6 catches for 48 yards, 8 yards per catch. RJ Maryland, 2 for 18, 9 yards per catch. Yamir Knight, 4 for 16. That's 4 yards a catch. When you look at that and you say, wait, they didn't really make a whole lot of big plays. That's my point. That's the point, because he took what the defense gave him, and how many extensive drives did SMU have that ended up in points? That goes back to the quarterback. That 100% goes back to the quarterback, because it tests to the highest degree when you've got to matriculate the ball down the field multiple times in a game. That goes back to the continuity between play caller and quarterback. And they are in lockstep right now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the shot plays aren't there. Okay, cool. We'll run the ball. Didn't do that. Fantastic. If you took the 1 touchdown burst from Chris Johnson away, it was like 35 yards on 23 carries. They didn't run the ball well yesterday. But we're going to run the ball. We'll do our RPOs. And we're just going to dink and dunk you down the field. You want to come out of it? Nope. All right, cool. We'll just do it again. And Kevin's good. He's good with that. And Rhett Lashley, he's good with that. And Casey Woods and De'Aaron King, they're good. Just take what the defense gives you. Let your playmakers do the work. And we'll figure it out from there. This was Rhett Lashley after the game, talking about his quarterback. And talking about how he just made plays down the field. If I can find this quote again. But he's also playing within the offense, and he's just like, whatever you call, I'm going to go execute it. Like, he's never frustrated when things aren't going well. He just goes out and plays because he loves the game. He loves his school, loves the city, and he loves his teammates. The part about his decision-making, you call the game more aggressively when you believe in your quarterback. I'm thinking nobody believes in their quarterback more than we believe in ours. That was the head coach. That was the head coach, Rhett Lashley. He believes in us. We believe in him. We got our dude. And if they're going to play us like they played him, like they did, all right, cool. We'll go down and score 34 points. Offense scored 27 points. You get the idea. We'll go down there and score 27 points on you. And our defense is good enough, especially against a Stanford team with an offense that just isn't very good. Even though they ran the ball well, got to give them credit for that. The CJ Williams wide receiver had a good game. But with that defensive line, yeah, sure. We'll dare Stanford in a lower possession game to come try to beat us, and we score 27 points. That's cool. But it starts with your quarterback not getting greedy and being perfectly fine with just taking what's there and being in lockstep with the play callers who already understand that. And sometimes that's hard because young men, you want to be aggressive, you want to push the envelope. It takes a certain level of restraint and control and poise to just say, nah, I'm going to take this. This is available. I'm going to take that. This is available. Maybe my receivers can make a play for me. In a world of egos, in a world of social media, and in a world of the adoration coming from the explosives, from the fireworks, it takes a certain level of human and a certain level of poise to say, nope, you guys going to play back? All right, cool. We'll pick you apart slowly. It's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. And it certainly was. And Kevin Jennings is the head of the snake in that regard. Hey, coming up next, Jennings wasn't the only one that had a pretty impressive day. I got to give it up to this defensive line for what now? We'll talk about that on the other side. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the scoreboard. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward for me was the interception return touchdown at the end of the game. By Justin Medlock. As that pretty much slammed the door on any chances that Stanford had to come back. And SMU is now 2-0 in conference play ahead of a road trip to Clemson. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. Just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, welcome back to Locked On SMU. Hey, be sure to subscribe to the channel, by the way, and also give me a follow on Twitter at Gray_Singleton2. Should be a blast. I love interacting with all of you guys as well. Appreciate the interaction, and I'll keep interacting with you all as well in the comments or on Twitter. Again, Gray_Singleton2. Welcome back to Locked On SMU. So I got to give it up to the defensive line in this game against Stanford. Now, why? Because you might be asking, yeah, Grayson, what was so great about this defensive line? Cole Tabb ran for 62 yards on 9 carries. That's 7 yards a carry. Micah Ford ran for 53 yards on 16 carries. That's 3.3 yards a carry, but at times he looked better than that. So why are we giving up to this defensive line? Because despite all that, Stanford's rushing output was 2.3 yards per carry. And let me be frank. Let me be absolutely frank. I think it is so freaking stupid. We'll word it like that. I think it is incredibly freaking stupid that sacks go down as negatively affecting your rushing yards because that's a pass play. I like how the NFL does it better, where you just lose the net passing yards. That's just me. Y'all can fight with me on that if you want. But speaking of sacks, that's where we're going. Because this SMU defensive line put up 6 of those things. 1.5 from Cam Robertson, a sack apiece from Brandon Maizano, Isaiah Smith, Jeffrey Yimba, Terry Webb, and another half sack from Speedy. And we came into this game knowing that Stanford could not block. They could not keep the quarterback upright, and the quarterback also cannot keep himself upright. And we have to, cross both of those roads because some people believe sacks are a quarterback stat, and some believe that it's a reflection on the offensive line. I think both bear some responsibility depending on how the play goes down. But all in all, whether it's the offensive line or whether it was Ben Gulbranson, Stanford coming into this SMU game could not keep the quarterback upright. Gulbranson had been sacked 14 times leading up to this game. And SMU said, okay, we'll do pretty much half of that in this one game alone. And no, they did not stop the run particularly well. They didn't. Like that, there's no two ways around that. They did not. And they certainly didn't stop it satisfactorily. Now, I will say situationally, and we'll talk about that to close up the show, situationally, the defensive line in terms of the run game was excellent. But as it pertained to getting after the quarterback, this offense had no chance. It had no chance to get anything sustained, anything consistent, because the quarterback was flat on his behind the entirety of the game. And when there is a conspicuous weakness in a particular team, especially if it matches up with your strength, you have to go dominate it. You must. It is a must that you dominate that. And they did. They absolutely did. Could they have had more sacks? Probably. Potentially. But in terms of the outlook coming into the game, you felt like that was something that needed to be done. If you didn't stop the run, okay, fine. That's good on good, and maybe they just might be a little bit better. That's fine. But when it's bad on good, that has to be exposed. It has to. And by the way, and it was, college does not keep track, at least publicly or at least readily availably, of quarterback hurries. But I would bet that there were about 3 or 4 on top of the sacks that they had. But Isaiah Smith is starting to look like he's back on a good track. Cam Robertson is the leader of that defensive line, and he's showing up to play. And then the 2 defensive tackles, Mba and Webb, who I have harped on for a lot of this year, man. Those cats are good. And there's not a whole lot of teams around the country that have defensive tackles that can rush the passer like they can. Sure, they can clog the middle and stop the run, but those dudes can get back there and put some heat on the quarterback. And when you have tackles that can do that and push the pile or push the pocket back and are also pretty agile on their feet, quarterback has nowhere to step up. And it becomes a very perilous activity in terms of how you can throw the football, especially if your tackles are in any way suspect as it pertains to blocking up the edge rushers. So those two being an impact in the pass rushing game is monumental, in my opinion. And I love those dudes. And Terry Webb coming back after being shaken up, Jeffrey M'Ba continuing to do his thing, man. They have a complete defensive line. It's not a very deep defensive line, by the way. That does need to be pointed out. And I do wonder if that will come up at some point in the season. I'm very curious. But it isn't a very deep defensive line. But in terms of the dudes that are out there, shoot, they're getting it done. They are getting it done. And I needed to see them get after Ben Gulbranson. And they did. And why this is of particular encouragement is because I look at that game against Miami in 3 weeks' time. And I know we're not supposed to be looking ahead and looking past opponents and whatnot. But I look at that, and here's what we know. Carson Beck is akin to Ben Gulbranson in this one area. I'm going to let that sit so you guys can think about it. Those two are similar in the space that they do not make a whole lot of plays with their legs. Carson is not going to be out of the pocket extending. You know where Carson is the best quarterback in college football? When that big old offensive line is keeping him clean. If that offensive line keeps him clean, Carson Beck, shoot, he's the number one pick in the draft. But if you get pressure on him, especially with the way that Cam Robertson and, Isaiah Smith can move, and some of these linebackers can move a little bit, if you get pressure on him, he could reasonably be prone to mistakes. And, you go back to that last season with Carson Beck at Georgia when he was turning the ball over and his completion percentage was down. He just didn't look like the same dude. Pressure and drop passes had a lot to do with it. So if you can get interior pressure up against anybody, not just Beck, but that's the next great quarterback you're going to play. I don't really know what to make about Cade Klubnik. I know he's really good. Don't get me wrong. He's really good. I don't know if he's a great quarterback. And also, Klubnik is his own issue because he can move out of the pocket. So that's gonna require a totally different conversation that we will have later on in the week. But as it pertains to getting after quarterbacks that don't move a lot, SMU certainly has the ability to do that with the D tackles pushing the pocket up the middle and giving you nowhere to step up and out. So in terms of forward thinking, you liked what SMU put on display this week. But in terms of just reminiscing on 2 days ago, they got it done. And that should give you confidence going forward because you just need to get it done against the teams you're supposed to dominate. When you have matchups that you're supposed to dominate them. And then okay, now we think we can hold up. Because if you're not dominating, then we don't know how it's going to translate to much better competition. Or let me rephrase that. We're not very confident in how it's going to translate to bigger competition. But dominate where you're supposed to dominate, and then we can really talk about good on good when it comes to the Clemsons of the world, the Miamis of the world, Louisvilles of the world, those types of matchups. And I'm very curious to see if they can hold up. But I get a really good positive sign because they handled their business against a very weak pass pro team and a quarterback who is pretty much a statue in the pocket and holds the ball for a pretty long time. Coming up next, we'll close up the show with this. Has SMU figured out how to be situationally good on offense and on defense? Is that really what they're going to be like as a team? We'll talk about that to close up shop coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And guess what? You can use it however you want. same game parlays, live betting, jumping on that live action, or stack those player props, create a lineup, and then see if you hit on some more or lesses. But either way you want to play, put down $5, and if you win, you'll win $300 in bonus bets. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. We're also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. Whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money, an all-in-one finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives like all of you. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. It does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You can identify that you aren't saving as much as you thought because Monarch helps you notice an inefficient investment allocation and discover forgotten 401ks from previous jobs. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. All right, let's close up the show talking about some situational football, a word that you probably wish I would stop using. But it is something that the best teams in college football do well. They are situationally good. When it comes to those high leverage moments, they tend to win a lot of them. And what are some of those high leverage moments? Well, how about fourth downs? Right. SMU converted, or Stanford converted a couple of them toward the end of the game. But keep this in mind. SMU was 2 for 2 on fourth downs. When they converted a fourth down, they scored on the drive. As a matter of fact, they scored on a fourth down. Their first touchdown of the game came on that swing out to Derek McFall, which, by the way, excellent call. Excellent call by Rhett Lashley and an excellent execution by Kevin Jennings because Stanford brought the blitz. KJ's like, all right, cool, there's my outlet. Get it to him, touchdown. It was perfect. Perfect call, perfect execution. But SMU also held Stanford. The one fourth down that Stanford didn't convert, you remember it? The goal line stand. Stanford comes out with no points. Loses all the momentum. As a matter of fact, let's look back at that, by the way, because I want to know, how long was that drive? That drive was 18 plays. Like, this is how demoralizing this is. 18 plays, 73 yards, 9 minutes and 46 seconds taken off the clock, and you score 0 points. I mean, at that point, the game was over because guess what SMU did right off of it? 6 plays, 98 yards, and a touchdown. And by the way, you want to talk about situational football too? I'm going to give you this. Teams talk about the middle 8 a lot. That is a big situational moment in football. The final 4 minutes before halftime and the first 4 minutes out of halftime. And SMU throttled Stanford in that regard. Throttled them. Because it had ticked down under 4 minutes during that Stanford drive. And they came away with no points. Right after it, SMU scored a touchdown. Now, Stanford came back and scored the touchdown before half. But basically, that was 2 possessions in the final 4 minutes that Stanford only netted 7 points. And they were in the red zone both times. SMU scored a touchdown. Stanford punted to begin the third quarter. And then SMU went in and scored a touchdown to make it 24-7. And at that point, Stanford was so far out of their comfort zone that they weren't going to come back. So you talked about situational football. Let's start with that right there. The goal line stand and then scoring a touchdown right off of it. And you talk about an extended, maybe a little bit extended middle 8 that SMU clearly won. That is great situational football right there. SMU won the penalty battle too. SMU won the penalty battle. 7 penalties for 53 yards. Stanford had 10 for 95, which was really uncharacteristic. And by the way, A couple of SMU's penalties were complete garbage, by the way, especially that one drive late in the second half. You had a pass interference that was, I don't know where they got that one from. And then they had the taunting penalties. I can't remember which corner it was that did that, and they got called for taunting, and Rhett Lashley probably looked the maddest I've ever seen him. Because it's just, do you want to was it Barnes or was it Speedy? You guys might remember. You want to tell him not to celebrate? I guess maybe. But it ain't his fault the receiver was still on the ground. That was a dumb penalty in and of itself. So basically, in terms of penalties that weren't dumb, they had 5 penalties. And by the way, Stanford didn't even score on that drive either. So if you want, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to say this. If you want to believe that SMU could get back to where it was a season ago, this is the type of improvement that you're looking at. Sure, you've got the quarterback. Sure, you're getting healthier and healthier along the offense. By the way, PJ Williams, I totally missed on this one in the recap yesterday, but PJ Williams didn't play at right tackle. But if you want to even allow yourself to think that there's a chance that SMU could get back to where it was, situational football is where that comes from. That's where you can get that hope. Because all of a sudden, they're better on third down. They weren't today, but they were on last week against Syracuse. They weren't very good, but the defense is holding teams to under a third of their third downs. You're making stops in the red zone. They had 3 red zone trips and came away with 7 points on 3 red zone trips. There was a turnover on downs, and there was an interception that ended up being returned for a touchdown. Again, just great situational football at the end of the game. If you can win the high leverage moments, because there's going to be plenty of them the rest of the way, but if you can win the high leverage moments, you're a good football team. You are a really, really good football team. And you can get places like that. Why were the Kansas City Chiefs so good last year? You remember? Because they won all the one-score games. And all the high leverage moments went their direction. You win the high leverage moments, there's a really, really good chance you win the game. And that's what I'm looking at when it comes to this SMU team. Can they do that? And can they continue to do that throughout the season? Also, high leverage moment, can you stay ahead of the chains and avoid sacks? Well, Kevin Jennings, blitz coming on a 4th down, unloads for a touchdown. Kevin Jennings about to be brought down, drive would be behind the sticks, able to flip it out to Chris Johnson Jr., who we'll talk about tomorrow because I've got some interesting thoughts on that situation, but flips it out to him, runs it in for a touchdown. Every single time that the game had an iota of a chance of swinging in Stanford's favor, SMU came up with the big plays. They made enough plays to win that game. And if they continue to stack that, there's no reason, if they do that in the high leverage situations, there's no reason that they can't beat Miami at home. There's no reason that they can't go and beat Clemson on the road this coming week, especially a Clemson team that is not a world beater this year. So if you want some hope that even with the 2 losses to Baylor and TCU, this team could still get back to the ACC championship game, that's where you would find it right there. Not the fact that the quarterback's playing great, because even though that's awesome, not the fact that the defense continues to improve, because that's great, but in the high leverage moments, they're coming out on top. That's where you look at that. All right, thanks for watching this Monday edition of Locked On SMU. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, check out Locked On ACC, hosted by Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono. I've been a guest on that show before. They're awesome. They break down the most interesting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to championships and every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, that'll do it. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Take it easy, everybody.